Chelsea are in trouble. In the last 9 Premier League games, they have only won 2, conceding 15 goals and only scoring 10. 5 of those came against Wolverhampton Wanderers and West Ham United. Something is seriously wrong, and in this video, we're going to be taking a look at what that could be, breaking down the tactics to find out why Chelsea right now are so broken. Since their win over Brentford on the 15th of December, Chelsea have only won 2 out of 9 Premier League games. Those wins came against Wolves and West Ham United. In that time, they have lost to the likes of Ipswich, they have lost to the likes of Brighton, and they've also lost to the likes of Fulham, drawing with Crystal Palace during that time as well. Something is seriously wrong, but I believe that there is an underlying trend to what is going wrong with Chelsea. Don't get me wrong, it's not only just this, but it's a real clear pattern that I've started to see throughout these Chelsea performances, and that is the setup that they end up playing against. Chelsea really struggle playing against a back 5. 6 out of the 9 Premier League matches that they have played since that win against Brentford have come against a back 5, and it's pretty easy once you start to break it down to see why. Here I've got Chelsea's setup, and we all know how Chelsea end up playing. Palmer drifts over into this attacking mid position, you've got the likes of Enzo moving forwards, Caicedo moves across, and of course Malo Gusto inverts. This creates Enzo Maresca's box formation that he really wants, and he wants to try to dominate the midfield with. This is all absolutely fine. Chalobah coming across, Colwill coming across, and Cucurella doing exactly the same. We have them set up against a back 3 or a back 5 depending on how you want to view it. But what the teams end up doing so well is making the lines compact. When you think about Chelsea, you think about Cole Palmer. You think about him being able to create, drifting into pockets of space and utilising his brilliant on-the-ball capabilities to be able to make something happen. But if these teams drop back and condense the lines to an extent that it gives Cole Palmer no space between these lines, it really gives him a major problem. And this is what teams do so well. They have isolated Cole Palmer to the point where he cannot really go forwards. He's seriously struggling, and that means that he's being forced out of this situation and forced to drop deep. Now, the real game changers here, or the possible game changers, are in the wingers. In both Madueke and Sancho, they are continuously being left with 1v1 scenarios, essentially asking them to beat their opposition player, their opposition winger, to try and get their team on the front foot. But time after time again, they don't want to. Enzo Maresca likes a steady build-up, utilising possession to best get themselves towards that box, not necessarily being too fast, not necessarily overcommitting, and that forces and leans into the opposition wanting to sit back, drop their line a bit deeper, and preventing Chelsea from running beyond. Another major issue is the inclusion of Christopher Nkunku, a player that Enzo Maresca clearly was willing to get rid of in January. Now, why is he going to be fully committed to the cause for this Chelsea side if Enzo Maresca was willing to let him go? Nicholas Jackson recently got an injury, and that means that Christopher Nkunku almost has to play, but he's not going to be making these runs in beyond, because there is no space due to the enemy team dropping back. It's an incredible situation that Chelsea have found themselves in. They have focused so much on dominating the ball in midfield and making sure they overload areas that they've forgotten about the attacking aspects of the pitch. Enzo Fernandez is not going to be making runs and beyond. Cole Palmer doesn't really want to be making runs and beyond. He wants to get on the ball and make things happen. And if you combine all of this together, it very quickly and very easily starts to become apparent why Chelsea cannot score goals. A perfect example of this is in their most recent game against Brighton. Brighton set up with a back 5. We'll label these players here, because I think it's really important to understand why Chelsea aren't working as well as they should. Although they have a lot of space on both flanks, They don't really know what to do with it. And I think Brighton worked this out, and Fabian Herzler worked this out in the game that they played against them last. If you don't know, Brighton played against Chelsea twice in the matter of 6 days. And it's in that second game that they really started to take the upper hand. And I think Fabian Herzler found out that Chelsea simply cannot play against a back five, because you're isolating your main creator in Cole Palmer. He can't do anything here. Because Brighton have their lines so compact and so deep, look, they're on the edge of that penalty area. There's no space for Cole Palmer to go at all. If you want to get the ball to him, there's no point, because he's always going to be found out. Which means the space is being left to the players that simply don't know what to do with the ball. And that sounds crazy, but if you get the ball to Neto, or if you get the ball to Sancho, or if you get the ball to somebody out wide, they don't know what to do with it. Because the moment they get confronted by one of the Brighton wingbacks, they either recycle backwards, forcing the play to regress, or they attempt to put a cross in. But the cross isn't worked on well enough because of the amount of players in the centre of the box, essentially meaning that they're able to clear it pretty easily. And Christopher Nkunku cannot make that movement himself. He simply cannot. Enzo Maresca needs to find a way of breaking down and really facilitating a good attack against a back five. That means shuffling players around a little bit more. That means working with pace a little bit more. That means working the flanks a little bit more. And that's something that we're going to come on to right now. Chelsea and Enzo Maresca are seriously undervaluing and underappreciating the significance of their wing play. And that is becoming so much more apparent the more they play against back five systems. The idea of a back five system is to make sure that the centre of the pitch is really nicely protected. It gives you extra bodies in the middle of the park, and it also enables for them to really constrict play within the width of the penalty area. But in doing that, it does give up space on these wide areas, and it forces 1v1 duels between your wingbacks and the opposition wingers. Because there are no options for double ups, because you're sacrificing those wingers for essentially extra midfield players or extra defenders, you are making sure and giving opportunities to the opposition wingers because you're giving those 1v1 opportunities. Chelsea simply are not taking those opportunities. They don't have the options for 1-2s and then passing down the line. They play too slow for that. They don't have the option to beat a man, or at least I haven't seen it. Their 1v1 capabilities are extraordinarily poor, and that is an avenue that they could really be utilising. Instead of this, once more, like I said, they recycle play and try to find Cole Palmer, who in all of this, in his frustration, has dropped deeper and deeper and deeper to shift play, to try and recycle the ball. But then once he does that, he's here. He's not where you want him to be, which is much closer to goal. In continuously persisting with the system that Enzo Maresca wants to utilise to have that box midfield, to overload the centre, Chelsea are essentially playing into every team that utilises a back five or a back three, because they are not facilitating and they are not utilising the wing play. And that is where most of these opportunities are, and they're just not using it. It is criminal. So what do you do? What do you change? How do you fix it? I think there are a couple of really simple changes that Enzo Maresca can make that can really alter the way that Chelsea operate against a back five or a back three. First of all, I'd look in midfield. You look at Caicedo and you look at Gusto, and I just don't think that works against a tight-knit, packed, centre of midfield back three system. It just simply isn't doing what he wants. He wants an overload. He wants the centre of the park to be completely dominated by Chelsea's midfield. This allows them to then be flexible to either go out wide or go central. The problem is that the opposition is playing a different game. They don't necessarily mind about the possession in midfield as long as you're not hurting them in the area that really counts. Later on down the field in the centre of the pitch, which means that Chelsea's priorities need to be different. They need to be out wide. And this is where Noni Madueke, Jadon Sancho, whether it's Pedro Neto, whoever it is, you need to prioritise the wingers. And they have clearly displayed that they are unable to win 1v1 situations. And that's absolutely fine. I'm not criticising for that. But in that case, you need to help them. And you need to give them some assistance. So I would drop Gusto and move him across. In doing that, yes, you're losing that control from that base midfield too, but there are options with that. You can drop Enzo if you want to. I wouldn't advise it, but I would move him there. I'd move Caicedo central and push Cucurella on just a touch. You're still keeping some extra defensive pressure, but you're also giving Cucurella and Gusto the license to make underlapping runs. Enzo Maresca, for whatever reason, I know the reason, but he doesn't like overlapping or underlapping runs. But these are crucial in trying to help your wingers to create and win those duels. Because if you have an underlapping run from Gusto, you're dragging a player away. Even if it's not that player, you're still dragging another player away. And you're giving space. This enables other players to then take it. If you're not making those movements and you're not making those runs, you're playing into the opposition's hands. Take Jadon Sancho, for example. Even if you don't push Cucurella forwards, you need Enzo to make this run. Because that run either takes away the wing-back, or it takes away a centre-back. Either way, it gives space to Sancho. And now he's got an option to play a 1-2 with Nkunku. Now he's got an option to play a pass into Palmer. Now he's got an option to do a whole heap of different things. But again, if you don't move and you don't start to move things away, it's never going to work. Nkunku needs space, and you need to create that space for him. The same goes for any of these Chelsea players. And in not moving and in just sticking to the system and the principles that Enzo Maresca has put into this side, you're essentially nullifying yourself. The moment you focus your wingers and give them the ability to do better at what they do best, you then need to isolate the particular positions that enable Chelsea to get the win. Against this system, the win condition for Chelsea are these areas, in between wing-back and centre-back. You isolate these areas and you have an amazing chance at not only creating chances but converting those into goals. Now, whether that is through Cole Palmer making a bit more of a selfless run into this channel, whether it's Malo Gusto making an underlapping run, whether it's Noni Madueke making a run in beyond the wingback, you need to find ways to isolate these channels. Running power is essential. I'm looking towards Enzo Fernandez to be making this run for Jadon Sancho. I'm looking for Jadon Sancho to be making this selfless run into this channel. And the moment that you get there and the moment that you hit the byline, you're then available for cutbacks. You're then available for a number of different opportunities. But then you also require the second part to this, and that's runs from these opposite players. The moment that your player on one side of the pitch gets towards the byline or even anywhere near the area that we have just mentioned, you need Madueke to be making this run, Cole Palmer to be making this run, Nkunku, obviously. The moment you start committing your players and flooding that box and making sure that you're isolating those areas, Chelsea's options will be incredibly higher. And it gives them so many more opportunities. At the moment, they are being stifled. At the moment, they are being suffocated in the way that they are playing. The system isn't working and something needs to change. Let's talk defence, because in the 9 Premier League games that Chelsea have played since that win over Brentford, they've conceded 15 goals. 10 of those have come in the 6 games that they played against a back 5. And it's again another big problem with them playing against this system. So what goes wrong? Typically, what you're going to find is similar to what you find with their attacking play. They struggle to really dominate the wide areas. Chelsea opt for a very narrow back 4, and that is due to them wanting to stop the flow through the centre. Enzo Maresca is almost completely obsessed with the centre of the pitch, making sure that he dominates this area. But in doing that, he's somewhat sacrificing the ability for them to defend against these wide areas. And this is where, once again, we're focusing on those wingers, because Cucurella and Gusto need to tuck in to make sure they are not being left exposed through this wide player and this wide player. It leaves Jadon Sancho and Madueke, in this particular case, it could be other Chelsea wingers, but in this particular case, with the job of marking the wingbacks. If they don't do that, and let's be honest guys, they don't really want to do that, you're giving a load of license, and 2v1s become very apparent. yes, they could be cheating to be able to go back and create those turnovers. But the problem you've got with that is that Enzo Maresca doesn't necessarily like transitioning particularly quickly. Yes, he wants to be able to get on the front foot, and yes, he wants to isolate duels, but he's not necessarily pushing his team on to do that. Chelsea are not a transitional based side. So that means that you're essentially not utilising anything from these two. They need to come back and help their teammates. They need to come back and help with the build-up. If you're going to be slow in the build-up, you need to be slow in the defence, if that makes sense. You need to make sure that you're stopping this, and then you need to be concerned about the runners from deep, because Caicedo and Enzo have so much ground to cover. They've got so much work to do to try and stop this. Again, they're the ones being overloaded. Nkunku and Palmer in this particular instance are not going to be dropping back to help with the flow of midfield. They're not going to be doing what the opposition are when it comes to defending, which means that Enzo has to deal with 3 players, Caicedo the same, and all of a sudden Chelsea start getting overloaded in a load of situations, especially out wide. And when you look at the physical capabilities of some of the opposition strikers, it's no wonder why some of the crosses, some of the interplay, it's really starting to break down this Chelsea defence. Once again, they need to change something. They need to be in it as a group and utilise these wingers in a defensive sense as well as an offensive sense. Combine this with the play that they want to have and the build-up that they want to have later down the line, and this should solve a couple at the very least of Chelsea's problems. But they need to sort out these wide areas because they are a big issue. And we saw this exact instance unfold in their game against Brighton. Look at how narrow this Chelsea backline are. Look at that. Now this is a really good defensive position. You're stopping the opposition from coming through the centre. Really good. Look at the line between Sancho and Caicedo and the back line. You can't really have any player here whatsoever. Really good. But what you're sacrificing with that is the wide areas. Look at how narrow they are. Look at how much space Minter has on the other side. Look how much space Mitoma has. And this is what Brighton and Fabian Herzog have found out. They can't go through the centre, so they'll go out wide. And this is what Chelsea really need to figure out. This is what Enzo Maresca needs to learn. You cannot play the same way all of the time. You need to adapt. You need to change. I'm not saying he needs to change his philosophy. I'm not saying he needs to change his formation. Just adapt to the game state. Chelsea at times cannot go through the centre, so you need to find different ways of playing. You need to find a way of getting over the problem, and that's what Brighton do here. They focus down this left-hand side, you've got an option of danger down this right-hand side, and all of a sudden you're exploiting a load of space and a load of problems. Rutte drives at Gusto and then tries to hit the byline and crosses into the box. Now, of course, it gets a little bit fortuitous. Of course, it gets a deflection off of Colwill that hits onto Jorgensen. Of course, it's really unfortunate, but they're doing it through a system that they understand. They've been able to isolate that wide area, and they've got their fortunes from getting the ball into the box with players willing to attack the ball. It ricochets out, of course, but then what have you got? You've got your other wide player coming inside. You've got your other wide player willing to gamble, getting into the box, and it's through this that they manage to get their goal. If this is Madueke, he stands here, and he's just on the edge of the penalty area. He needs to get in. Sancho needs to get in. You need to help your team with creating and carving out chances. And this is what Brighton do so well. Of course, a little bit of skill helps them get over it, but the general idea is utilising that wide play because of the system not allowing them to go through the centre. It's really simple stuff, but it's something that I think if Enzo Maresca changes, Chelsea's fortune will also. And there you have it, guys. That is a small breakdown of what I believe is going wrong with Chelsea at the moment. Like I said, a couple of changes here and there, and I believe their fortunes can be turned around in almost an instant. Change a couple of players, mix around a couple of things, and stray away from that box formation that Maresca is obsessed with, and all of a sudden you might see Chelsea become a whole different side. It's not necessarily going to change overnight, but it definitely could help. Much better than they're doing right now, of course. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I would love to hear from you, so please do get involved and let me know. What do you think is the answer to Chelsea's problems, and how do you see them finishing come the end of the season? Let me know your thoughts. I would love to hear from you. Thank you ever so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something new, and I hope to see you in the next one. But until then, my friends, take care.